Georgia and Moldova have also filed their signed applications. So in these circumstances, the main question that Georgia has to answer to itself is what steps should it consider as pragmatic steps, and should it give Russia a chance to blackmail its Euro-Atlantic future with the threat of war when Russia's military presence gets closer every day to Tbilisi through creeping occupation. The Checkpoint sat down with Giorgi Papava for a one-to-one interview. Thank you, Giorgi, for your time. Putin's devastating war in Ukraine. How does this relate to Georgia? And is it important for Georgia to clearly show its side in this war?
First of all, thanks for having me. What is going on today in Ukraine is directly related to Georgia. Ukrainians today, Georgians in the past, are facing the Russian aggression and can clearly see what their neighbor is made of and what Russia is willing to do in order to achieve its mysterious goals. And the way the war in Ukraine will end will determine the future of Georgia to a very large extent. You can imagine a country which can become under attack anytime. What kind of development that country can achieve. And if until the war in Ukraine there was still years of to some extent misunderstanding in part of Georgia's public and in part of its government that being nice to Russia may yield some results, that perspective will disappear in the nearest future if it has not already disappeared, and we will be a country, if the war does not end the way we'd like and Ukrainians like to end the war, we will be a neighboring country to a world's aggressor who can do anything, like who can not care about anything, who can create its own world and in that world conquer you. And all this translates into lost lives, lost opportunities, lost future to families, and it is unimaginable how we as a country should not declare our side in this. We should be very clear, transparent, that our future is along with Ukraine, along with our Western allies, and this is the only path of development, not only for Georgia, but for any country in the world, but especially for Georgia.
We hear from the government some so to say mixed messages, and one of the messages is that Georgia is not in the same position as the US, as the West, as the more developed countries like Germany, for example, because of the 2008 war, and Georgia must be pragmatic in this situation. Now you said that pragmatism for Georgia is to take a clear side.
Any development of well-being of Georgians in the future, any economic development is not sustainable if it's dependent on Russia, because Russia does not value not just economic development, they just don't value lives, right? So to consider some type of cooperation with Russia, some type of being nice to Russia as a means of future development, that's absurd. That's why, yes, some economic cost will be borne by Georgia, but that is the price that we have to pay for freedom and for future economic development. So when we say that it could potentially be pragmatic to be nice to Russia, to say that, okay, we will not create any additional sanctions, that's not pragmatic in my opinion. That's just stupid and very short-term oriented mindset. And I think we as a country should be clear that yes, in next month, next year, next 10 years, we could bear some costs of for being very clear on where we stand. But that's the cost that we are paying for development for future generations of Georgia and for more longer-term prosperity.
Speaking of pragmatism, we see how Russia is playing this game, right? It's said that Georgia has the chance for the direct flights with Russia, that Georgian milk and cheese can enter Russian market. What should be the stance of the private sector in this? What is your take? Should it see Russia's market as an opportunity in this situation?
We see today, even today, that even though there is no currently ongoing war between Russia and Georgia, and even though the war is geographically taking place in Ukraine, still any business who was reliant on some type of activity, economic transactions with Russia is hurt right now, right? And this is the case when we are not even directly involved in the war. We are in war with Russia for many years, but we are not having armed conflict going on in this very second. Still, the dependence of Georgian businesses on Russia has been devastating for them. So that's probably the best way for them to take lessons and plan for their future. And other than that, like just to consider a more long-term perspective, right? We have history of last 10 years, 20 years. We can see that any profits, any revenues that we can, any positive that we can get from Russian market is very short-lived, and at the end of the day results in deterioration of businesses' economic standing and financial standing. And therefore, I think this is one more lesson for Georgian private sector to diminish its ties with Russian market and get oriented towards other partners, which thank God are quite abundant. And but the private sector itself needs to take some more initiative in this regard, because we have Europeans, Americans who are trying to push our private sector, our businesses towards the West, and sometimes we ourselves agree to short-term benefits rather than long-term development, and that has been hurting us for years now.
And also, what are some of the main challenges that are in front of Georgia right now? And do you see any plan to withstand these challenges?
So unfortunately for us, the main challenge is the outcome of the war and how it will affect us. Unfortunately, we have no way to impact the outcome of the Russian war in Ukraine. What we can do in this process is make sure that we are so clearly standing next to Ukraine and next to the West, that when the war ends, no matter how it ends, there is no doubt that we have done whatever we could have done in this process. So when it comes to future development, when it comes to not supporting Ukraine in the armed conflict, but in supporting Ukraine's rebuilding its country economically and otherwise, that in that process we will be part of that. And in long term, that's the critical. So I think we should think forward in 5-10 years when we kind of will be analyzing how this conflict has evolved, what were our position during that conflict. That will determine our future, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.